I hadn't planned to be home that night. My name was still on the call schedule, another 12-hour shift at the hospital, the kind of night where your body moves, but your soul begs for rest. But fate, in all its irony, gave me a reprieve. A colleague offered to switch, and for the first time in weeks, I felt light. I picked up a bottle of his favorite red, a box of chocolates too sweet for my taste but perfect for his, and walked home on aching feet with something rare pulsing in my chest. Joy. I took the elevator barefoot, letting the carpet muffle my steps, imagining how I'd surprise him, my husband, my partner, the man I thought I knew. The moment I stepped inside, I noticed his keys on the table, a small, comforting detail that shattered seconds later. Laughter. Not mine, not his. Feminine, intimate. A voice that dripped through the hallway like poison. Then his voice, low and unguarded. "You're incredible, Diana." It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was real. The rustle of bedsheets, the sound of pleasure that didn't belong to me, the scent of a perfume I'd never wear. Too musky, too aggressive. I stood there frozen, the bag in my hand trembling so hard the wine clinked against the chocolates like a cruel, mocking rhythm. The door to our bedroom was half open. So was the life I thought I'd built. I didn't rush in. I didn't scream. I simply stood there, staring at the red stilettos tossed near the closet. Careless, brazen. My throat burned. Not from tears, but from the realization that the betrayal wasn't quiet. It had been living in my home, speaking with my husband's voice, wearing my robe, the robe he gave me. When the door slammed behind me, I wasn't trying to make a scene. I just needed to hear something real, something louder than the lies. They scrambled. Whispers. Footsteps. A man pretending to be surprised. A woman pretending to be innocent. And me? I wasn't pretending anymore. He emerged first, shirt halfway buttoned, eyes wide like a child caught stealing. "This isn't what it looks like," he said. The words came from his mouth but sounded like a stranger. Then she appeared. Tall, blonde, wearing my silk robe. The gall in her eyes was worse than anything she said aloud. "Oh, I didn't know." She smiled, fingers lingering at the belt like she might undress right there. "Thomas offered it." My name left her lips like we were old friends sharing lattes and gossip. My fists clenched. I didn't want explanations. I wanted silence. But Thomas, ever the manipulator, tried to retake control. "Julia, let's talk. It's a misunderstanding." I stared at him like he was a specimen under glass. "You were inside her, in our bed, wearing my robe." His expression flickered. Shame, arrogance, then something uglier. "Don't be vulgar," he snapped. "You're a doctor. Act like one." And just like that, the dam broke. I hurled the wine against the wall, watched it explode in red like an artery bursting open. "You're pathetic," he muttered. Then the final blow. "You think you're taking Ryan with you? He's mine." I stepped forward, voice low and final. "Ryan was never yours, Thomas. Not in blood, not in love, and I'm done pretending." I didn't take anything with me that night. Not the clothes I bought with my first paycheck, not the framed photo from our honeymoon in Santorini that used to make me believe we were real. I didn't even take my shoes. I walked out barefoot, clutching a single thought like a lifeline. Get Ryan and run. Every part of my body ached as I climbed the stairs to Vicky's apartment, each step heavier than the last. I hadn't cried in front of Thomas. I hadn't given him that. But alone, under the yellowed light of Vicky's hallway, the tears finally came. Hot, furious, not grief, but rage. Rage at myself for trusting him. Rage at the way betrayal always feels personal, even when it's just cowardice in disguise. Vicky opened the door without a word, just saw my face and pulled me in. Ryan was asleep on her couch, curled into the same position he used to sleep in when he was 3. Arms around his stuffed fox, feet poking out from the throw blanket. He looked so small, so unaware of the storm that had just ripped his world open. I wanted to pick him up, press my forehead against his, tell him everything would be okay, but I couldn't lie. Not to him. Not anymore. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table gripping a mug of cooling tea and stared at the floor like it might offer answers. But there were none. I stayed up that night watching the sky change colors, from black to bruised blue, to the first pale streaks of morning. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. There was a pulse in my chest that wouldn't slow, as if my body still hadn't processed what it had seen. The robe, the voice, the audacity. At some point, Vicky came out and sat with me. She didn't push. She just poured a second cup and waited until I spoke. "I need to leave Boston," I said flatly. "For good." She nodded, quiet. "Where will you go?" I paused, unsure. I didn't have an answer. I only knew what I was running from, not yet what I was running toward. That afternoon, while Ryan napped in Vicky's bed, I opened my laptop and started searching listings. Cities, towns, cabins, rentals. Nothing felt right, until I saw it. A crooked little listing in Vermont. No flashy photos, just one image of a worn farmhouse with apple trees sagging under autumn weight. The price was low enough to raise red flags, but I didn't care. Something about it pulled at me, like a memory I hadn't lived yet. I clicked. I called. A voice picked up on the second ring. "Walter Finch," it said, raspy but warm. I explained what I was looking for. Not everything, just enough. A fresh start. Space. Quiet. "You'd be buying it," he said, "but I'd still be living there. At least until..." His voice trailed off. "I understand," I told him. And I meant it. 2 days later, I packed everything I could fit into my SUV. Ryan sat in the back with his fox and a new notebook I'd bought him the day before. He didn't ask questions, just watched the world pass by through the window. "Are we going on vacation?" he asked once, eyes wide. I met his gaze in the rearview mirror and said, "No, sweetheart. We're going somewhere better. Somewhere we can finally be ourselves." And just like that, the city disappeared behind us, skyline shrinking in the distance, swallowed by trees, by silence, by possibility. The closer we got to Vermont, the more it felt like I could finally exhale. The highways narrowed into winding roads, trees grew taller, the air quieter. Boston began to feel like a bad dream, distant, sharp around the edges, but already fading. Ryan pointed out every animal he saw along the way: deer in the woods, cows in the pastures, a hawk circling the sky like it had nothing to do but float. "Look, Mom," he shouted once, face pressed to the glass. "A covered bridge, like in fairy tales." I smiled, though my chest ached, because part of me still believed in fairy tales too, and another part knew better. We arrived just before sunset. The farmhouse looked like it had been standing there for 100 years and didn't care who came or went. White paint peeling, porch swing swaying in the breeze, apple trees bending under the weight of the season. And on that porch, a man waited, tall, weathered, and dressed in clothes that looked older than me. Walter Finch. "You must be Julia," he said, voice as cracked and kind as the porch steps. And this must be the young man I heard about. Ryan clutched my side, peeking up at him with suspicion and awe. "He looks like Grandpa from my book," he whispered. Walter smiled. When he opened the front door, I swear the house breathed. The air inside wasn't stale, it was storied. Like every creak, every shift in the floorboards was a voice whispering, "We remember." The scent hit me first. A mix of aged wood, dried herbs, and something sweet. Like apples baked long ago and still lingering. Ryan stepped in slowly, his sneakers squeaking on the hardwood. "It's like a museum," he said in awe. Walter chuckled softly. "Not a museum, just an old house that's still standing." He gave us a quiet tour. The living room with its wall of books, the kitchen with its iron stove, a narrow staircase that led to rooms soaked in light. One small room overlooked the orchard. "This one's for Ryan," Walter said. "My son used to stare out that same window." I didn't ask what happened to his son. I didn't have to. It was in his voice, in the way he hesitated at the doorway, like memory was standing right beside him. Ryan ran to the window, gazing out like he'd found his place. "I love it," he said, and I felt something loosen in my chest. Hope. Real, fragile, and unfamiliar. After the tour, we sat on the porch. The chairs creaked, the breeze carried the scent of apples, and Walter finally spoke what I think he'd been holding in. "I didn't expect someone like you," he said. "Thought some developer would snatch this place up, pave it over for parking lots and plastic cabins. But you came with something heavy behind your eyes. And I know what that looks like." I looked at him, unsure what to say, but he didn't need an answer. "Pain clings to cities," he said, voice softer than before. "Out here, the air's different. It doesn't heal you, but it gives you room to do the healing yourself." Ryan was already wandering the yard, inspecting trees like a tiny scientist. "He'll like it here," Walter said. "Kids need space. So do the broken parts of us that forgot how to breathe." I swallowed hard. He wasn't just talking about Ryan, and somehow he knew I understood. That night, for the first time in a long time, I felt still. Not healed, not fixed, but still. And that was enough. The mornings in Finch House were nothing like Boston. There were no sirens, no emails buzzing before dawn, no alarms slicing through sleep like scalpels. Just the distant sound of birdsong, the rustle of wind through apple trees, and the slow groan of old wood adjusting to another day. On that first morning, I stood on the porch with my coffee, watching Ryan crouch in the orchard, completely absorbed by a patch of moss. Walter joined me silently, his wool vest buttoned, a mug steaming in his hands. "He's got curiosity," he said with a faint smile. "That's rare. Most kids only look down when there's a screen in front of them." Ryan ran back, holding up a red apple like it was treasure. "Can I eat it?" he asked, eyes wide. Walter nodded. "Wipe it on your sleeve first, old farmer's trick." The joy in my son's face, simple, wild, unguarded, made my throat tighten. It had been so long since I'd seen him like that, so long since either of us had known what it felt like to be safe. After breakfast, I drove into town to meet the staff at the local medical center. It was a small building tucked between a diner and a post office, with peeling paint and friendly faces. The nurses welcomed me cautiously but kindly, as if sensing I was carrying more than just a resume in my bag. By the end of the first week, I'd been invited to a Friday potluck. Small-town tests of belonging, I guessed. Ryan adjusted faster than I ever imagined. His school was no bigger than my old dormitory floor, just 2 classrooms and a playground covered in leaves. But he came home with dirt on his jeans and stories in his mouth about a boy named Liam, a teacher with hair like a bird's nest, a science experiment gone hilariously wrong. He laughed in a way I hadn't heard since before Thomas broke us. Something was blooming in him, and slowly, in me too. Even Walter began to change. In the evenings, after I finished sorting through patient files or bandaging scrapes, he'd sit in the living room with Ryan, reading from his ancient collection of books. Stories of adventurers and rebels, of people who challenged the world and lived to tell about it. Ryan would sit cross-legged on the rug, wide-eyed, while I lingered in the doorway, arms folded, just listening. And every so often, Walter would glance at me, not with pity, not with questions, but with something quieter, recognition, as if he knew exactly what it meant to rebuild your life brick by crumbling brick. One Saturday, he invited us to help with his garden. "Just because I'm dying doesn't mean I can't grow a decent tomato," he joked, handing Ryan a spade. I'd never gardened in my life. My world had been surgery and science, stainless steel and fluorescent lights. But there I was, knees in the dirt, fingers buried in the earth, while Ryan giggled and Walter hummed a tune I didn't recognize. The soil was warm, rich, the sun gentle. For a moment, I forgot the hospital. I forgot Thomas. I forgot the sound of my heart breaking in our old apartment. There was only this: the smell of growing things and the sound of my son laughing. That evening, we sat on the porch with lemonade in our hands and dirt still under our fingernails. Walter told stories of harvest festivals, neighbors who would trade pies for firewood, winters that pulled people closer instead of pushing them apart. "Community," he said softly, watching the orchard sway. "That's what keeps us human. Not money, not degrees. Just people showing up when it counts." I stared at the horizon, feeling something I hadn't in a long time: belonging. Not to a place, to a life. A real one worth protecting. And for the first time since I left Boston, I felt steady enough to say it aloud. "We're staying." It started with a cough, low, rattling, and too wet to ignore. Walter brushed it off, like he always did, blaming the wind or his age or the way Vermont mornings settle into the bones. But this time, something in the sound made my hands still mid-motion, chart unfinished on the table. I found him sitting in his usual chair by the fire, hand at his chest, eyes closed like he was trying to will the pain away. "You okay?" I asked. He opened one eye, offered a crooked smile. "Just the usual. Don't fuss, doctor. Summers." But I was fussing. Not because I was a doctor, because I had come to care. He'd told me weeks ago he had late-stage lung cancer, but something hadn't sat right since I first read his diagnosis. The paperwork had gaps. The scans were poor quality. No biopsies, just assumptions. That night, after Walter went to bed, I scanned his medical file and sent it to a friend from Boston, a thoracic specialist I trusted more than anyone. "Something doesn't feel right," I wrote. "Tell me I'm wrong." A week later, the answer came. "You're not wrong. He doesn't have cancer. It's chronic bronchitis, treatable, manageable, but nowhere near terminal." I stared at the email until my hands went numb. Relief hit first, then fury. Why would anyone lie to a dying man about dying? The answer came sooner than expected. 2 days later, I stayed late at the clinic. As I passed Dr. Monroe's office, I heard voices. His door was cracked open just enough. "She won't last," he was saying. "Single mother, no roots. She'll sell eventually." Another man's voice replied, cold and calculated. "Keep the old man convinced he's running out of time. The house will be ours by spring." Resort plans, false diagnoses, real estate. This was never about Walter. It was always about Finch House. That night, I told Walter everything. He didn't speak at first, just stared at the fire, face pale, fists clenched on the armrests like he was trying to hold himself together. "He told me I was dying," he whispered, and I believed him. I nodded. "Because you trusted him, and because no one thinks their doctor is lying." He shook his head slowly. "This house, it's all I have left." My voice caught. "Not anymore. You have us now. and we're not letting them take this from you." I didn't know what I meant by "we" until I said it. But as the words left my mouth, I knew I wasn't backing down. The next few weeks were a storm of quiet strategy. I contacted my lawyer. We dug into Monroe's finances. We connected the dots. His diagnosis scams, the payments from Cole Real Estate, the pattern of terminal patients who sold too fast and died too slow. When we brought it to the town council, I expected silence, maybe doubt. But what I got was fire. One by one, neighbors stood with us. A widow with the same false diagnosis. A farmer pressured to sell. Even Monroe's nurse came forward. The council suspended him. Cole's plans collapsed. And for the first time in years, I watched justice rise. Not from a courtroom, but from a community unwilling to forget. That weekend, Walter stood on his porch, cane in hand, orchard glowing behind him, and said, "This house isn't just timber and nails, it's memory. And memory, when it's protected, becomes legacy." I watched Ryan run between the trees, his laughter ringing like music, and I knew we weren't just surviving, we were beginning again. And if this story haunted you the way it haunted me, don't just scroll past. Subscribe to They Never Saw It Coming, because sometimes the people we trust the most are the ones who bury the truth deepest. And in towns like this, what's hidden in the walls doesn't stay quiet forever.